What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another Walking on Water tutorial. We are out here in the middle of Lake Coeur d'Alene right now in preparation for Spring Chinook season down on the Columbia River and other small tributaries around that area. I wanted to talk about the 3 things that I wish that I knew before spring Chinook fishing, and these 3 things could help you, whether you're a beginner or an expert, be more effective on the water, or if you just want to get back to the basics of Chinook salmon fishing, or AKA spring Chinook fishing. And we're gonna go over those 3 things right now. Stay tuned, guys. All right, guys, so the first thing that we're gonna talk about is obviously and probably a no-brainer for a lot of people, but you would actually be surprised at how many people do this exact thing all the time, and it totally depicts whether or not you're gonna get on or catch fish on your trip, whether or not you live in that area and you're just going out for the day, or you're making a trip, planning a trip, 3 days, 4 days. This number one thing that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing will save you a lot of money if you just put it into play and start utilizing a very simple method of knowing where the fish are at. So the first thing that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing is knowing exactly where the fish are at. How do you know where the fish are at? There's a couple different things you can do to make sure that you know where the fish are at. First of all, time of year plays a big factor of when and if these fish are coming up the river or into your small tributary, or even back into your lake or body of water that you fish for spring Chinook. Just because it's a certain time of year does not mean that those fish are necessarily there. We have had runs a lot earlier in the season, February, early March, than we're gonna have this year. Weather, sea lions, so many different factors play a part in whether or not the fish are actually in the river. So how do you tell if the fish are actually in the river that you're fishing? And so you can go out there, you can plan a trip, you can save some money by not missing out on fish. First of all, there's a website that on the Columbia River mainly, and if your river has a dam, you can check the dam counts at the fish ladder at each dam. So you know, let's use Bonneville Dam for example. If you're looking online for fish, you type in Columbia River dam counts, and you go to Bonneville Dam and you see that only 2 fish have come over Bonneville Dam, it's probably not the best idea to go out there and waste 12 hours a day pounding away at the water trying to fish for these fish, right? Also, a smaller tributary, let's say a smaller tributary, a river off of the Columbia River or something like that, if they have fish hatcheries on it, so if you live in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, you can go online, and I'm sure a bunch of other places as well. You can go online, you can search the rivers and the tributaries that you're looking to fish, and you can access information on the state website that will tell you if that tributary actually has a hatchery on it. So the 2 ways and the two pieces of information that I wish I knew before I started spring Chinook fishing. The first one being check the dam counts to make sure that fish are actually in the water. Do not just base it off the weather and the season, because that honestly means nothing. Yes, fish do come and start coming in a certain time of year each year, but that doesn't mean they're in the location that you're looking to go fish. So 2, go online and check whether or not your river has a hatchery program. There's a lot of rivers. I'll name one river down in Oregon that I grew up on. It's called the Main Umpqua River. You can't check dam counts until you get a little bit higher up in the river system. So you know when the fish are up a ways, but if you want to fish the lower portion of that Main Umpqua River down there in Oregon, you're gonna need to understand when those fish are actually coming in. So, or if there's fish even there swimming through that river at all. Also, guys, check your regulations and make sure that you're fishing, whether or not it's barbless hooks or non-barbless hooks, whether or not it's one rod, whether or not you can fish for those salmon at all. So the first thing is knowing where the fish are at and understanding if your river even holds fish at all, and understanding where in the river system these fish are moving up from, so you know when those fish are gonna actually hit your river. If not, you're fishing blind, guys. Now, let's get into the number 2 thing that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing. Guys, please go over to the Walking on Water Facebook page, follow that thing. Also, you can join the Walking on Water private fishing group as well. But like, subscribe, and share this video, guys. It helps me a ton, and I really want you to be a part of the community. We have a lot more fishing to do this year. Stay tuned. All right, guys. So the number 2 thing that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing, and when I was a kid, my Uncle Brad, he's the one who taught me how to spring Chinook fish, how to Chinook fish, and realistically, how to fish, period. So, but growing up, once I became an adult and I started fishing for myself, I really didn't understand exactly what I was gonna need to get out, to be able to go out on the water and be effective spring Chinook fishing. The second thing that I wanna talk about, and everybody talks about this, and this is another kind of no-brainer one, is just the rod selection, the reel selection, the line selection, all the way down to your terminal tackle really fast, because these are things that seem super basic for a lot of people, but in all actuality, if you've never went out and bought this stuff for yourself, let's say you've taken a guided trip before, you went out, you've caught spring Chinook, you go on a guided trip every year, right? But finally you're like, okay, I wanna do this myself. I'm gonna get out on the water and I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna start catching these fish for myself. You're gonna need to understand what kind of rod, reel, line, and terminal tackle that you're gonna need to go out and fish effectively. So I like using a medium heavy rod for spring Chinook, as well as a rod with kind of a little bit of a softer tip, because I love running these short bus 360 Super Series flashers right here, and a softer tip gives me that nice pulsing action when the Super Series is working in the water. And so a medium heavy, this medium heavy actually is an 8.6 Lammet glass. This was a gift from when I was a little kid, so I'm a huge Okuma guy, but this one is tried and true and I can't just let it go yet. But it's paired with the Okuma cold water line counter. Line counters are obviously amazing tools to have in your arsenal when you're fishing in the river, especially, and you're using big lead, and you have to understand how deep you are, right? So I like to pair my line counter reel with 12 ounces of lead when I'm fishing with just 2 rods solo, and the line counter reel is actually gonna be the way that I track where that lead is in the water itself. So if I don't have a line counter reel, I have to drop it all the way down, I have to feel for bottom, I have to crank up a little bit. But if I have a line counter reel and I catch a fish, say at 13 feet deep, and I'm in 15 feet of water or 16 feet of water, you know what I mean? Then I can just replicate that again, put the rod back in the rod holder, and I'm fishing again, and I know that I'm in a place where those fish are actually biting and feeding, and that's just gonna make you that much more effective on the water. Okay? So the line itself, I opted in to use a high-vis line this year, and high-vis line is great. You can see it really well. It's a braided line, it's a 4 times braided line, and I absolutely love it. A lot of people though will say that you should take a Sharpie and run it up and down your line about 3 or 4 feet just above your first bead chain, just to prevent any off chance that a fish does see it. But in my mind, a lot of times, you're not getting a fish that's swimming down your line and attacking your bait from the flasher all the way down to your bait itself, right? These fish are coming up the river. You're trolling out and in and up and down. Yes, that is true. But also, these fish are coming up and attacking from behind your bait, right? So definitely take the extra precaution if you're superstitious in that fact. But high-vis line, in my opinion, does not change the bite to non-bite ratio of the fish itself. If you got a biter fish, that fish is gonna bite if you're using the right stuff. Okay, let's get down to the terminal tackle side of things. All right, guys, so the terminal tackle side, and this is honestly the most important part of your whole entire setup. I know you guys have probably seen these before, but these things are an absolute game changer. I got a glove blowout. Anyways, these things are an absolute game changer. This right here is just a weight slider. You simply attach your weight to it before you put it in the water, and you hook it up right here. But why this weight slider is so awesome and so cool, this is actually a VIP line lock weight slider, and it is absolutely freaking sick. If you see right here on top, there's a little slit right here, and you see how my bead chain inside this scent tube is actually locking right in to that VIP line lock right there. Absolutely key for keeping your line untwisted. These 360 Super Series flashers do create a lot of line twist, and it's not just the Super Series flashers, it's all of the 11-inch or all of the flashers that do a full 360 rotation. Short Bus by far is the best flasher company in my opinion. They are my tried and true, so I'm sticking with them. But no matter what, you're gonna get line twist if you're not running a VIP line lock. So you see here, that's locked into place, right? That's not going anywhere, okay? The weight sliding down against the bead chain, and this thing is stuck. It can only spin, right? The bead chain can only spin, your line cannot spin at all. So in my opinion, these are a must-have for every Spring Chinook setup that you're gonna use while trolling, okay? Now, the next piece that you need for all Spring Chinook type fishing, if you're gonna use a 360 Super Series flasher, and that is a bead chain. You definitely don't have to use a scent tube bead chain like I am right here. This is an Oregon Tackle bead chain with a scent tube on it. It makes it pretty legit. You can shoot scent in there and it'll leak it out over a long period of time throughout the day. I always try to run my stuff bare before I throw scent in a tube. If I'm getting hit, let's say I'm running herring or I'm running coon shrimp or something like that, that's an actual bait, then I'm gonna let that bait work as long as possible, as long as it's working. If I'm not getting hit, I'm not getting bites, I see other people around me getting hit, then definitely you might wanna switch it up. Okay, so a bead chain down to an interlock swivel, okay? Then guys, we have a bumper that goes down to our 360 Super Series flasher by Short Bus, and a lot of people will tell you different lengths, and if you ask 10 different people, you'll probably get 10 different lengths, and that's an actual fact, right? Everybody likes a little bit different thump. The shorter the bumper, the faster the blade's gonna spin. The longer the bumper, the slower it's gonna spin. So I opt in every single time, and I've been consistent with this. I've never changed it. I run a 24-inch bumper, I'm gonna tell you outright, and I always run a bigger piece of mono or fluorocarbon, whatever you want to use, as a bumper line. 50 to 80 pounds would be great. You want a nice stiff bumper, so when that thing's rotating, and as well, if you get your lure snagged up, you don't want the same weight as your leader as your bumper, so you lose your expensive flasher, because you don't want to lose these Short Bus flashers, guys. Okay, so I run a 24-inch bumper, and I'm going to show you why I run a 24-inch bumper in just 1 second when we put this in the water and we actually get a look at that nice thump that these 360s make. Then we go down to another bead chain just like this. Bead chains are king when you're 360 fishing at all, or honestly you're using any kind of Dodger flasher, and a lot of times, 90% of the time, unless you're bank fishing, you're going to be using a 360 Super Series or a triangle flasher, just like this one right here. Okay, so either way you can get line twists, and either way you want to run bead chains. That's just down to another interlock snap straight into the Short Bus flasher right here, and then of course you attach your meat and potatoes right down here at the bottom, and that's AKA your bait, whether or not it's a Brad's, a coon shrimp setup, a herring setup, depending on where you're fishing in the water. Okay guys, so that was my number 2 thing that I wish I knew before Spring Chinook fishing. I went out there my first time when I first started Spring Chinook fishing by myself. I literally bought a kokanee rod that I was kokanee fishing with, and I tried taking it springer fishing, and I got hooked up into a springer, and it absolutely destroyed me and my rod. I ended up losing the fish, and I wanted to know why. And I know it seems like it's not, I know it seems like just common sense, obviously, but if you don't know and you've never done it as an adult, or even as a kid, if you're watching, you just got to make sure that you have the right equipment for the job, and it's just going to ensure the fact that you get more fish into the net and into the boat, into the freezer, and on your freaking grill at home, and that's just going to be a lot more fun for you guys. So understanding what kind of equipment that you need to actually get out and go springer fishing is my number 2 thing that I wish I knew before springer fishing. All right guys, so the number 3 thing that I wish I knew before Spring Chinook fishing, and that is speed and how fast I need to actually go to catch spring Chinook, right? When I'm trolling in my boat on the Columbia River and I'm going upstream, it says I'm going like 0.9 miles an hour. Wow, that seems like it's way too slow, but you gotta take into account that there is a flow of water going downstream, and that is putting a lot of pressure on your bait and your 360 Super Series flashers. So understanding what speed you're going and what speed you need to go to make these things work properly is super important. If you're trolling downstream and you're like, wow, I'm going 2.4 miles an hour, but you're not getting the right thump, you're not getting the right spin on your herring, or you're not getting that blade to thump in the water on your coon shrimp rig, then you're not going the right speed. So a lot of people will actually say, oh no, it's 1.7 miles an hour. It's gotta be 1.9 miles an hour. No, it's 2 miles an hour. Well, in all actuality, none of those are 100% true. The only method to gauge your speed to be effective while fishing for spring Chinook is honestly the action of your bait itself. If I'm rigging up a herring and I'm going 1.6 miles an hour and I have the perfect spin on it, I'm gonna stay right there. If I rig up a herring and I tuned it and everything and I'm going 1.9 miles an hour and that herring is rolling a nice, slow, methodical roll just like I want it to, I'm gonna troll right there. If I rig up that herring and I'm going 1.5 miles an hour and it's perfect, I'm trolling right there. So what I'm trying to say is the third thing that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing is it's not all about the number on your fish finder or your lure Jensen lure speed. It's about how your bait is reacting in the water. Fish will reactively bite lures, but in my opinion, a lot more fish will bite a proper presentation of your bait that you're fishing in the water. So to be the most effective, let's dive in really fast and understand what these things are supposed to actually look like in the water. And when I mean look like in the water, we're gonna base 95% of our speed judgment off of what the flasher thump looks like. Whether or not you're fishing in the ocean or the bay or tidal water at the mouth of your river, or you're fishing 3/4 of the way up the fish's run of the river, the thump of your 360 Super Series is gonna depict whether or not you catch a lot more fish. Let's dive in and check out what it's actually supposed to look like. And now, this is subjective, right? I like my thump to be a nice heartbeat pulse. Some people like their thump to be a pop, pop pulse. You know what I mean? Everybody has their tried and true methods, and these are my opinions, and these are my 3 things that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing. So let's get in, let's take a look at that thump. All right, guys, as you can see at the end of the rod there, we're getting a nice 2 thump per heartbeat right now, and that's looking absolutely beautiful. You can tell that the 360 Super Series flasher is working well in the water because we're getting that soft tip of this 8.6 medium heavy action rod to thump and pulse extremely nice. Okay, we're only going 1.4 miles an hour, and that Super Series flasher is absolutely working perfectly in the water. For me, this is a good thump for me. I like how it's looking. I like the nice pulse. About 2 pulses every 1 Mississippi, and that is absolutely what you're looking for when you are spring Chinook fishing. And like I said, we're only going 1.4 miles an hour. All right, guys, this is 1.7 miles an hour. As you can tell, we're getting a little bit faster of a thump, and honestly, that's looking really good as well. I like the nice pulse, the deep pulse in the rod just like that, and you cannot go wrong with a nice subtle thump, 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 thump. All right, guys, now that you've seen what it's supposed to look like when you have your 360 Super Series flasher actually pulsing or thumping in the water, it is so important that you use your speedometer to catch fish 100%. And I can agree that everybody likes a certain speed. That's 100% true. Everybody has their opinions. But if I could give any advice, even to the most experienced angler, it's not always about speed. And whether or not you're trolling upriver or you're trolling downriver, those speeds are gonna vary. And that's what we're talking about, right? I'm not talking about fishing in a lake. I'm not talking about, you know, fishing in the, well, even in the bays and the oceans. You're affected by tide, whether or not the tide's going in, whether or not the tide's going out. And so either way, you're gonna have some sort of current that's pulling against your 360 Super Series flasher. And finding that right thump, that right heartbeat for the tip of your rod is gonna be essential for you guys to catching a lot more fish. So guys, this was the 3 things that I wish I knew before spring Chinook fishing. I hope these things helped you out, because even though a lot of them might seem like, wow, this dude, he's literally preaching brain dead things that everybody should know. There's a lot of people in the world, and a lot of people don't actually have all this information. So I hope this helped you guys learn a little bit of something about spring Chinook fishing. And these are just the 3 things that I wish I knew before I went spring Chinook fishing. So I'm happy to share them with you. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this Walking on Water tutorial. You guys, please go over to the Walking on Water Facebook page, follow that thing. Also, you can join the Walking on Water private fishing group as well. But like, subscribe, and share this video, guys. It helps me a ton, and I really want you to be a part of the community. We have a lot more fishing to do this year. Stay tuned.